Well, good afternoon. I'd like to thank you for coming out today for the fifth finalist for the Edelman Award. My name is Michael Trick. I am the chair of the judging panel. Just a few announcements before we begin. This session is being recorded, and so please turn off your cell phones so it does not get picked up on the recording. And similarly, there's no need for you to do your own recording or live streaming because we have professionals at the back doing that. Please try not to move around too much, and if you leave, please be aware you will not be allowed re-entry, although this is being simulcast in another room. Finally, after the 40-minute presentation, there will be about 10 minutes for questions from the judges. It is my pleasure to introduce the next finalist, Syngenta.
Farming in the 1920s was not sophisticated. It was just some men working the fields with simple equipment. Now, in this next photo, you see Dr. William Davis. He's the father of one of our team members, Craig Davis. He's on a piece of equipment like that, working on a seed company research farm. Looks like it's from a similar time, maybe the 1940s, but no, that was 1970. So despite a half a century between these photos, they're pretty similar, because change came slowly to the farm in that era. For much of human history, the only way to feed a growing population was to plant more seeds on ever larger plots of land. So as you see in this chart, the corn production, that blue line, closely tracked the amount of land used, the green, over the course of 75 years. At the beginning of that period, the world's population was just 1.5 billion. And there was land to expand production. But when the population took off, it was no longer possible to add sufficient land to grow the food that was needed. The traditional methods could not sustainably feed the world population. Water scarcity, soil erosion, the competing needs of housing and industry, they had to be addressed. Now, by 1940, the world's population had reached 2.3 billion, and agriculture entered the modern age with a staggering burst of innovation and productivity. As you can see here, production, the blue, soared, while less land was being devoted to farming. Science was making its contribution to agriculture. Engineers developed improved tillage, harvesting, grain storage, tractors, combines, water management. From chemistry came synthetic fertilizers and crop protection products. From biology, hybridization, the green revolution, integrated pest management. I'm Dan Dyer. I'm the head of our Seeds Product Development at Syngenta, and we're here to talk to you about agriculture's next science revolution, analytics. It's an advance that will help farmers increase the output of crops with less land, water, and other inputs. This approach is not genetic engineering. It's the increased sophistication of our ability to improve crops through native genetic diversity. Today, our team is going to tell you how they're taking the best practices of operations research that have transformed the way packages are delivered and trains and planes are kept on schedule and supply chains are optimized, and applying those to agricultural innovation. Now, that's an innovation that's long overdue in the fields. But we're not doing this for a world of 1.5 billion or 2.3 billion or even the 7 billion that we have now. The farmer managing production of the food supply in tomorrow will have the burden of feeding a world of 11 billion. As our CEO, Mike Mack, will tell you in this video message, increasing agriculture's productivity remains one of humanity's greatest challenges.
Operations research is reshaping Syngenta. We are a research and development company, 28,000 men and women around the world completely devoted to modern technology and its ability to help farmers bring plant potential to life. As a company, we've embraced the power of analytics to drive our decision-making. The sophisticated suite of tools that our Soybean R&D team has developed is now being deployed across all our major crop development programs. Operations research is transforming the way we do business, bringing together excellent science and precision data. But innovation in agriculture isn't just good business. It directly addresses one of humanity's greatest challenges, how to feed a growing population in an environmentally sustainable and socially responsible way. Lives depend on it. Every day, the global population rises by 200,000. It's hard to comprehend the scale, except to say that in the next 10 years, the world's population will grow by 750 million. That's the equivalent of adding the entire population of Europe in a single decade. While many of the natural resources that we rely on to produce food today are already severely stressed. Over the next 50 years, we're going to have to feed 2.5 billion more people, which means that we must achieve the efficiency required to produce more food than we produced over these last 10,000 years. But that's not all. We must also find a way to feed the world without further stressing the planet, without requiring large increases in cultivated land, water, or other inputs, all while protecting nature and improving the livelihoods for people in rural communities. Collectively, we must take this responsibility. That's why at Syngenta, we're committing ourselves to making a measurable contribution to help farmers address these challenges by 2020. We call our approach the Good Growth Plan. It's an important step in taking our contribution to a new level. The Good Growth Plan, simply put, will commit our company to improving resource efficiency while rejuvenating ecosystems. Achieving the Good Growth Plan requires sound science delivered at scale. The application of operations research by our soybean breeding program is doing precisely this by building unique strength in our science base. Better designed breeding projects, transparency, and superior designs create a new standard of efficient delivery for our industry. So I couldn't be more proud that our team is being recognized as finalists for the Franz Edelman Award. As you're about to hear, we have an exciting story to tell about how this innovation in analytics is changing our company and our industry for the better.
The Good Growth Plan. That's Syngenta's commitment to advancing sustainable agriculture. Through these 6 public commitments, we're engaged with thousands of customers and stakeholders who will help us succeed in achieving this mission. So how do we do it? How do we increase productivity without using more land, more water, or other inputs? The foundation is superior crop genetics. We develop superior genetics by recombining the current genetics, and then we select the best from the new generation. We call that genetic gain, and it's a concept that has its roots as far back as when Gregor Mendel was experimenting with garden peas 150 years ago. Now, our understanding of the complexities and mechanisms, of course, of genetics is far advanced from those days, but it still all begins with the creation of new genetic combinations through a process called cross-pollination.
Cross-pollinating soybeans is an intricate process. After gathering the needed tools, we take a plant from the female row and select a flower bud that's ready to open. We use tweezers to carefully remove the leaf-like structures surrounding the flower. Then, we remove the petals. The next step is finding a suitable male plant and removing its flower. Then, using the tweezers, we carefully remove its stamen. Now, we return to the female flower and carefully brush the loose pollen onto the female flower's stigma. At this point, the cross-pollination is complete. Finally, the breeder documents what he's done and places a tag on the pollinated plant.
From each cross-pollination comes a new individual, combines the genetics of its parents. And then over the subsequent generations, these individuals result in entire populations with a diversity of characteristics that combine the attributes of the original parent. Every season, that process is repeated thousands of times and generate millions of new and different individuals. From these begin our processes of selection, from which the breeder will identify the new varieties that have the higher yield and the ability to withstand storms and drought, insects, disease. While these individual tasks are straightforward, the integrated system of breeding and selection is phenomenally complex. The genome, or the genetic map of a plant, has thousands of alleles or genetic factors, and they can recombine in limitless combinations. And very rare is that combination that expresses the characteristics that will succeed commercially. In the past, the breeders lacked the tools to address that complexity, so they chose the best-looking plants, they combined them through cross-pollination, and then they evaluated the offspring, and they repeated that process over and over, year after year. But the results improve dramatically when the breeders make their choices based on mathematics and engineering and science. The entire breeding selection process is being transformed through data analytics. Creating successful varieties, it takes at least 6 years from that cross-pollination to commercial product. We're now using operations research in our R&D effort to reduce the amount of time, effort, money spent providing farmers with varieties optimized for their soil conditions and environment. They're able to produce more food. We progress toward achieving our good growth plans. Now we're going to hear from Joe Byram, whose team has been leading the application of operations research to soybean within Syngenta Seeds Product Development.
So why should you care about soybeans? Soybean is America's top value crop export, worth $42 billion every year. Global soybean demand has risen to 315 million tons annually. The soybean influence is everywhere. It's in food products such as cooking oils and salad dressings. It's found in industrial products like biodiesel and plastics. Soybeans are the world's largest source of protein for feeding livestock and poultry. Syngenta has been at the forefront of soybean research for nearly 50 years with the goal of developing varieties with higher yield potential. Higher yield is how we ensure a growing population will have the food it needs without burdening the natural resources, and we refer to the rate at which a breeder makes genetic improvements to yield as genetic gain. Over the last 60 years, operations research has been used in agriculture to optimize the feeding of livestock, to improve crop rotation, to manage farms and assess public policy goals. Analytics has made farms and farmers more efficient, but we're doing something unique at Syngenta. We are applying OR to breeding to make the plants themselves more efficient. Each of our 4 tools comes into play at various phases of the variety development pipeline, which describes a new soybean variety's journey toward becoming a successful commercial product. In the variety design phase, 2 soybean parents are mated to produce progeny with a unique combination of the parent traits. In the variety development phase, progeny advance via self-pollination for 4 generations. Every year, we make about 5,000 crosses for nearly 600,000 new varieties. If the favorable traits prove promising, they advance to the variety evaluation phase, where field trials put them to the test. Generally, about 40,000 end up tested for yield and other traits. About 40 new varieties reach the end of the pipeline. Those that outperform existing varieties secure the rare honor of becoming a commercial product. Early on, we optimistically thought a single tool could guide breeders through the pipeline, but each individual tool took between 2,000 and 4,000 man-hours to create. It made more sense to separate the distinct functions that address particular aspects of breeding complexity. Soybeans are small, but do not be fooled. They are not simple. Each bean contains around 46,000 genes that determine its potential. In harnessing that potential, a soybean breeder faces 200 decisions across the pipeline, which works out to be 1.6 times 10 to the power of 60 possible options. That's just the genetic complexity of our endeavor. The challenges don't end there. We face the logistical complexity of growing over 500,000 plants in more than 150 locations around the world, across continents and in countries that have their own unique rules and regulations. We face the analytical complexity, the need to balance the trade-offs involved when determining how, where, and when to test genetic traits. Finally, we must come to grips with the environmental noise, the single greatest barrier in accurately measuring genetic gain. A plant can grow taller because it has the genetic trait to do so, or because it received more sunlight and water. It's essential to know the difference. Our tools tackle these challenges head on. Breeders traditionally avoid complexity with scale. Cross enough plants, perform enough trials, and you'll eventually find a commercial variety. This proves slow, expensive, and not particularly effective. Our tools replace guesswork and subjectivity with objective analysis and quantified uncertainty through all phases of the process of bringing an advanced seed to market. We'll describe the 4 tools one by one, but keep in mind they work as an integrated whole to address the complexity of modern breeding. So let's start with Bruce Luzi, a soybean project lead at Syngenta, who will explain the unique advantages of our first tool, the Breeding Project Lead tool.
The goal of a soybean breeder, like me, is to develop a better soybean variety for a global market. With over 150 fields spread across North and South America, knowing where and when to plant isn't a simple decision. Each field location has its own growing season, growing challenges, costs, and capacity. When it's winter in North America, we might grow our plants in South America, as an example. To achieve my variety development goals, however, I must get the combination of season and location just right. Before each growing season, I face an incomprehensible number of decision combinations that the BPL tool handles. Out of 56 decision points in the tool interface, which you see to my left, there are 2.4 times 10 to the power of 24 possible options. And this tool simulates and quantifies the consequences of all of them. That's what's amazing about this tool. The BPL tool evaluates how much investment will be needed to develop an improved soybean variety, given a set of design parameters such as which parents should I mate, which and how many desirable traits should I select in advance, where and when should I evaluate the parent's offspring, and so on. The tool will even warn me if my inputs might create a bottleneck in the development pipeline. When I activate the tool, stochastic optimization takes the average of many runs to reduce variability and to generate the expected cost, time, and variety attrition for each variety development pipeline design. And I can view the simulation results directly on the tool interface. So let's look at the bottom line. The Breeding Project Lead tool accelerates genetic gain by helping me and other breeders make better breeding decisions. As a consequence, the tool allows us to reduce the cost to reach the market with a new variety and reduce the time required to do so. Now Jack Klober, owner of Chromite, will introduce our next tool, the Yield Trial Design Optimizer.
How do you know when you have a seed variety able to produce food for a growing population? Yield trials. In designing an effective test of a seed variety's potential, the breeder must answer 3 distinct questions for each of these 3 stages. How many varieties do I test? How many locations? And how many replications? This creates a total of 9 parameters. Those 9 parameters create a really incomprehensible number of design options. About 10 to the 12th. Before the Yield Trial Design Optimizer existed, there was simply no way to single out the optimal design from so many possibilities. It would take 3 years just to test a single 9-parameter design in the field. So the breeder's temptation was to supersize. Supersize experiments by maximizing the number of locations and replications with the hope that maybe you'll also maximize the probability of selecting the best variety. We've learned from developing and then validating the yield trial simulation that investing more time and money doesn't necessarily produce better results. Syngenta breeders now want to optimize, not supersize. The simulation and optimization tool creates a model from historical data that allows the breeder to find the combination of the 9 parameters that produces the highest yield at the lowest cost. The resulting design gets the size and scope of the variety development and evaluation phases right from the outset. We found routine optimization packages couldn't reliably find the most effective designs at each cost level due to the variety of the outcomes from environmental factors such as soil, sunlight, rainfall, weeds, and insects. So we developed a unique randomization approach. In the first analysis phase, we simulate around 2,000 randomly generated but reasonable designs. The team of breeders decided what qualified as a reasonable design. Using the easily calculated cost and the mean of 400 three-year simulations for each design, we plotted all the designs. The blue dots in this chart represent the highest yield at a given cost. Then we used an iterative Pareto algorithm to select the top 10% for further investigation. Because we only simulated each design 400 times, we're not yet confident in the yield estimates. So in phase 2, we re-estimate these top designs and again plot cost against the mean of now 2,000 iterations, reducing the 90% confidence interval of the mean yield to plus or minus only 0.08 of a bushel per acre. The resulting chart presents the breeder with about 200 designs and a distinct efficient frontier. This Pareto approach is effective now for identifying the best design for a given cost. We then used a neural network as an evaluating tool. It essentially uses a complex nonlinear regression of the 9 parameters to identify the most impactful variables, providing insight into what's driving those designs on the efficient frontier. Giving the breeder the power to choose from several feasible designs on or near the efficient frontier allows our breeders to direct resources where they'll have the greatest impact on genetic gain or yield. So let's look at the bottom line. Thanks to the yield trial design optimizer, stage 1 designs identified by this tool can increase the number of varieties tested, which increases genetic gain while reducing the total cost. Some stage 2 designs can actually reduce the size of a trial by 50% and still achieve the same selection accuracy. That's quantifiable cost savings. Bruce will now explain our tool that manages genetic complexity.
Bad planning decisions have a compounding negative effect. In plant breeding, an incorrect choice made at the beginning of a development process might manifest itself several years later, turning a small mistake into a huge disaster. Our trait integration tool is so revolutionary because it manages a genetic component of the variety development process in a way that allows me and other breeders to visualize what's possible in real time so that better choices are made right from the start. The TI tool is a multi-criteria decision-making and process planning tool that addresses my breeding needs and answers some of the questions I ask during the design process. Do I want to save time? Do I want to save costs? Not so long ago, it would have taken me weeks to plan a quality trait integration plan, and one that still didn't take into account the full complexity of the process. Now I can simulate different TI designs in a fraction of the time with greater confidence of success. Now that I've been using this tool, I can't imagine how I ever was able to do my job without it. Introgression refers to the transfer of desirable traits from one soybean variety into another through a natural breeding process known as backcrossing. Backcrossing refers to the mating or crossing of a hybrid plant with its parent plant so that the offspring will carry more of that parent's traits. The breeder continues backcrossing over multiple generations until the offspring contain the targeted percentage of desirable traits from that parent. The TI tool models each of the factors needed to successfully transfer a trait from one soybean line to another, including the number of donor varieties that are used, the number of traits that are being introgressed, and the introgression pathway. The tool lets me plan each step of the process, knowing the impact of each change on the investment needed, the time required, and the probability of success. In the past, I would have handled the complex interplay of decision options with software that used distribution averages to plan a single donor and single trait process. The TI tool handles calculations that are several orders of magnitude more complex, providing the insight I need to make better choices. The power of OR is clear from this example of the TI tool output for two designs, Design 1 and Design 2. With this tool, I discovered that just one change to design number 1, which was changing the number of initial mating attempts from 20 to 200, I can slash the cost per successful introgression by up to 80%. But of course, it's much more complex than that. If we take what would be considered a standard trait introgression process, highlighted in orange, the tool tells me that I can boost the probability of success by more than 60% by identifying the right mix of initial mating attempts and back-cross mating attempts. Starting with the right design costs 25% more upfront, but it avoids an additional cost of 167% of base, and I achieve success without wasting additional time, which in this case would have been 1,680 days, or more than 4.5 years. So let's look at the bottom line. Before we created the TI tool, we typically saw a probability of success of between 20 and 50%. That means over half of our trials were wasted effort and had to be repeated. Now, thanks to the TI tool, we've increased our probability of success to over 85%. We did increase overall cost by 25%, but the cost for each successful introgression decreased. The reduction in wasted effort is a quantifiable and significant value. Now Jack will describe our final tool, the data quality cart.
Syngenta invests millions of dollars planting seeds to test how they will perform. A breeder must know whether to advance variety A or variety B based on the test data. But how can he or she be sure? The answer isn't always obvious. Did this plant thrive because it has better genes, or because it simply had more water and more sunlight? You don't want to advance a variety just because it was lucky enough to be planted in the most fertile part of the field. The DQC tool helps bring clarity by filtering out environmental noise. So here's a great example of the power of visualization. These images show the yield patterns from one of the fields the breeders worked on a few years ago. The effects of the varieties have been removed. So looking at this, red means lower than expected yield, and blue means higher than expected. The raw patterns in the before chart don't reveal very much until the breeder averaged the yield for each of the rows, cutting across hundreds of different varieties. On one side, they saw pairs of rows side by side yielding less than expected. On the other side, the rows yielded more than expected. Too low, too high, too low. They asked what could cause this odd pattern, and the investigation discovered the combine used in this particular field weighed down more heavily on one side, decreasing performance. Now, thanks to DQC, the manufacturer identified and fixed a flaw in its product, ensuring better accuracy in the future, and the breeder made better selection decisions. The DQC tool allows the breeder to conduct a residual analysis, which of course is a calculated difference between the observed value of a trait and a predicted value of a trait based on a statistical model across many locations. Residuals indicate a shortcoming of the statistical model, and while random residuals are expected, patterns in these residuals suggest systematic causes which bias the data. The way Syngenta is now tracking down errors, improving experimental protocol, and enhancing future data quality would have been impossible before the DQC. So let's look at the bottom line here. To achieve a given result, you can either increase the number of tests performed, which requires, of course, more investment, or you can improve the quality of the data. This tool is all about improving the data quality so that better decisions that directly impact genetic gain can be made without requiring more investment. It's about getting better bang for the buck. Before DQC, we'd end up throwing out data when we detected a problem. Now we're able to keep all the data generated, which really is invaluable. The tool's reduction of experimental error has produced equally impressive results. As the table shows, reducing the coefficient of variation also reduces the number of replications required to obtain the same statistical difference. Any decrease in replication reduces costs significantly. Since deploying the DQC, our experimental error has dropped by an average of 2%. The move from 8 to 6% is equivalent to nearly doubling the size of the program. In other words, we can do in 11 replications what otherwise would have taken 20. The DQC tool allows Syngenta to match the performance of competitors who have to invest more in their program, essentially doubling the number of replications to get the same results. As impressive as that sounds, the combined suite of tools do even more as an integrated whole, as Joe will explain.
You have heard about the functions of each of our soybean R&D tools in depth. Now it is time to take a look at the quantifiable impact of smarter decision making, what our customers see as a superior product. In 2013, Soy Capital Ag Services, an independent organization, tested 20 soybean varieties. Syngenta's NK soybeans dominated field trials, taking first, second, and third place wins for highest yield. In 2014, Syngenta varieties were again found on the podium. Before we began using these tools, our product would improve every year. We realized an average annual increase across our portfolio of about 0.8 bushels per acre. That average is now closer to 2.5. As you can see, we are way ahead of where we would have been without the tools. We are creating this measurably better product without spending more on R&D, something that would have been impossible without these tools. In the past, competitiveness in this industry was a function of size. A company able to spend more money planting more seeds was the most successful. Thanks to our 4 tools working together as a whole, our soybean seeds program can match the performance of competitors who are not using analytics in this way. Even when these companies spend far more on their programs. Thanks to the new analytical tools, our conservative tally is that we will realize more than $287 million in cost optimization for Syngenta Seeds Product Development during the period from 2012 to 2016. What this means is we would have had to invest an additional $287 million to achieve the same level of genetic gain that we're realizing with these tools. This is in the context of a $2.5 billion total invested by Syngenta in seeds product development during those years. Our goal is to do more with less, to fulfill our good growth plan commitments of reducing agriculture's impact on the environment and the people that produce the crops we need, while helping to ensure a growing global population will have enough food for the future generations. But there is also financial upside. Thanks to these tools, we will substantially improve our probability of success in delivering a seeds portfolio value exceeding $1.5 billion. This is the future of crop development. As you can see from our breeders, who have embraced the shift to data-driven analysis within the company with great enthusiasm. Our senior breeder, Craig Davis, whose father we saw in the fields at the start of our presentation, will tell you how he, as an end user, unfamiliar with the ways of operations research, recognized its value.
I admit I was a skeptic at first. I couldn't see how computer program code could possibly help me make better decisions in the field and the greenhouse where we do our work. But as I worked with the code writers, I began to get an appreciation for new insights they were giving me into my own project. And I quickly saw that the tools they were developing would bring better ability to make better decisions. Decisions that were going to be based more on mathematics and probability than simply experience and intuition as it had been before. When we first brought in our senior breeders for training in the new OR tools, we heard the usual grumbling about computers making our decisions for us. One of the breeders with 32 years experience was among the most vocal, but only 30 minutes into the first training session, he realized and said, I've never looked at my program in this way before. So we're very excited by these new tools. We recognize the power they bring to us to make better breeding decisions, and we use them routinely in every major breeding decision we make. And we are looking forward to the next round of tools as they are developed.
Better decision making, more genetic gain. That's how we are building a better soybean. Our Chief Operating Officer, John Parr, will now close our presentation with his thoughts on how this achievement will have a lasting impact on global agriculture.
I hope you're all as excited as I am about what our team has been doing. It represents the move away from a mechanical past and towards a data-driven future in agriculture. The power of analytics is truly transformational for agriculture. Not only is it helping us advance our good growth plan commitments, it's helping Syngenta's bottom line as well. In other words, operations research breeds success. And, of course, these techniques don't just work for soybeans. Last year, Syngenta's R&D leaders launched an initiative to implement these successful operations research tools across Syngenta's crop platform, using customized versions for corn, for sunflower, rice, and even watermelon. We hope to have this initiative complete in 2018. We've seen the value of analytics, and our future depends on it. In fact, everyone's future depends on it. Better decision-making is essential to meeting the challenge of feeding a planet with 11 billion people in an environmentally sustainable way. This is no easy task, but Syngenta is committed to making a measurable contribution, to make crops more efficient, to rescue more farmland, to help biodiversity flourish, to empower smallholders, and of course to help people stay safe and look after every worker. Thanks to operations research, we're closer to meeting our ambitious goals. That's why operations research has become integral to Syngenta's business. We will increasingly rely upon sophisticated analytical methods to meet the needs of a growing population, enhancing food security in a sustainable and socially responsible way. So we thank you for your time and attention. Being a finalist for the Franz Edelman Award is truly a great honor, and we greatly appreciate your consideration.
So thank you again for your time and attention and sharing our excitement about how advanced analytics is assuring the achievement of our good growth plan commitments. Thank you.
Thank you.